All right, class, if you missed, or if you got this as a recommended video for the Unit 8 quiz, then it means you missed some question that had to do with the empirical rule, or otherwise known as the 68, 95, 99.7 rule. And so what you want to remember is that when the mean is in the middle of a bell-shaped normal distribution, when you go out one standard deviation unit, both to the left and to the right, you capture roughly 68% in between, which is cut in half because of the symmetry, where we're getting the 34% right over here and the 34%. So that's the way these numbers in this graph have been derived, because when you go out two standard deviation units in both directions, you capture 95%. And then when you go out three standard deviation units in both directions, you capture 99.7%. So that's where these numbers have come from. But you've been provided with this Excel worksheet for Unit 8, and it's really an easy way, without having to go back through figuring out where these numbers came from. It's really an easy way to get your answers to the empirical rule questions. So I'm going to show you that. There is also a question like this one on the left that is, it's not necessarily going to be answers that are exactly like 68, 95, or 99.7, but with knowledge of those numbers, you should be able to answer the questions without really having to do any calculations. We did this in seminar, but I wanted to go back through it in case you were missing a question like this. Like, I believe if you missed, I think it was question number 8, then it had to do more with what we're looking at on the left. So knowing that the mean is in the middle, and because of the symmetry, then when we draw the line straight down, like right in the middle, we need to realize, first of all, that the total area under the curve is 1, or 100%. So that if I were to say find the probability below 0 days before the due date, then that would just mean this half. So whatever the mean is, if it asks you to find the probability or percent below the mean, that's 50%, or above the mean, that's 50%. But what you do have to be careful about is some of these questions ask for you to put an answer in percent form to 1 decimal place. So assume I have to say what percent of births take place before the due date, then I would have to answer that as 50%. But if it said take it to 1 decimal place, I'd have to put the extra 0. That is how you write 50% to 1 decimal place. So that would be the percentage below the mean and also the percentage above the mean. Then let's look at this one. About what percent of the births occur 20 days or more before the due date? So depending on what mean and standard deviation they give you, like let me even change these around. Suppose this was test scores where the mean was 80. So I'll put the 80 in the middle. And let's suppose the standard deviation was 5. Well, that means I would put 85, 90, and 95. All I'm going to do is start at the mean and just add 5 each time, since 5 would be the standard deviation. And to go to the left, I subtract 5. So 75, 70, and 65. And then I could say about what percent of the grades are, say, below a 75. Well, below a 75, what you would have to reason through is that 1 standard deviation is going to take care of, let me get another color going here. 1 standard deviation means there's 34% there, because remember, that's half of the 68. So below a 75 would have to be the leftover, and remember, this whole half is 50%. So if I took 50% minus the 34%, then I would realize that below a score of 75 would have to be roughly 16%. But once again, if I have to round it to 1 decimal place, I would have to put 16.0%. So just be really careful about the formatting, so that answer would be this. About what percent of the births, okay, and of course I'm changing the topic, about what percent of the scores are between, say, a 75 and an 80. Well, 75 and 80 would be roughly 34%. But of course, if you have to write it to one decimal place, 34.0%. That would be the answer here. And then let's suppose it says about what percent of the grades are 81 or higher. Well, notice by using the empirical rule where we skipped by 5s, since 5 was the standard deviation, I don't have a specific number at 81, but what I do want to realize is 81 or higher would have to be slightly less than 50%, because back at 80 or higher is 50%. So 81 or higher is just slightly less than 50%. So you would just pick the most logical choice. Some of these are going to be multiple choice answers on your quiz. And of course, if you needed to round that to one decimal place, you would have 48.0%. So there's definitely, I think question 8 was one more like that. The other thing is be prepared. Let's suppose it said, what percent of the grades are within 10 points of the mean. Well, understand that if it says what percent of the grades are within 10 points of the mean, knowing that the mean was an 80, all that means is go out 10 to the left and to the right and find the percent of grades between those values. So within means between, and within 10 points means go out 10 to the left of the mean, 10 to the right of the mean, and find the percentage between that. Well, both of those numbers are 2 standard deviation units out. 1, 2 that way, 1, 2 that way. And remember, 2 standard deviation units out is 95%. Because 1 standard deviation unit out within 1 standard deviation unit is 68%. Within 2 standard deviation units is 95%. So that would be the answer to this question. And within 3 standard deviation units is 99.7%. So you just have to realize that the 10 points is actually 2 standard deviation units. But, you know, the main thing is get your graph labeled with your numbers, and then it's easy to see that. Okay, so that's definitely one type of question that you may have missed that had, you know, multiple parts to it. Yeah, and I think number 16, if you missed that one, was the one that started talking about the within. So you had to know that meant going to the left and to the right and getting the percentage in between. And then another type of question may have just been something like this. And what you have to do is really read the directions carefully, because when it says to use the 68-95 rule, then you got to realize that that means to see how it says that right here. You've got to realize that that means use this empirical rule. And you either are going to use the graph that I gave you in the seminar slides that had all of these separate numbers that you could add up, or my suggestion would be it's so easy to use the Excel worksheet provided for you. And I'm going to show you how to do that on this question. This is a lot like, I think, question number 9 if you missed question 9. All right, so it says assume IQs are normally distributed. So I would draw a bell curve with a mean of 100. Well, I'm going to go put 100 in the middle then. And a standard deviation of 16. Well, that means I'm going to add 16 once, twice, and 3 times. And I'm going to subtract 16 once, twice. I think that's 68. Let's see. And 3 times. So that would give you those numbers. So that if you wanted to use this graph over here and just add percentages, that's fine. But I'm going to show you how you don't even have to do the math. You just type the numbers in. So find the relative frequency. Now, I don't remember on this one. I think this was actually another one where they wanted a percent to one decimal place. So let's practice that on this one. Find the percent to one decimal place of IQs greater than 116. Well, I'm just going to come over here, and where it says mean, I'm going to put in the 100. That was given. Standard deviation was 16. And if it says find the percentage of IQs greater than 116, that was the only number provided, so only value provided. So in this third box, I type in skip down here. I type in the number 116, and I press enter. And you will notice that it told me that 116 is a z-score of 1. That's fine. I don't even really need to know that. IQs greater than 116 makes me go to the above answer. Above says 0.16, so that would be 16%. But if I've got to put the 0 in there to round it to one decimal place, then do that, and that would fit the appropriate format. So it's easy to get that. You just have to pay attention to words like greater than, so you'll know to go to the above box rather than the below box. Or, again, you could actually go over here and say that 116 is right there, so just add 13.5% plus 2.35% plus 0.15%, but that's really what this Excel worksheet's already doing for you. The relative frequency, or actually, again, let's practice percentages, of IQs between a 52 and a 100. Well, that means I'm going to go back here, and for the lower value, put the 52, the higher value, put 100, and press enter, and go look at the between number. It's 49.85%, so I would put 49.9%. And the percentage of IQs within 48 points. Well, that means take the mean and subtract 48. So go from 52 and take the mean and add 48. So that means I'm trying to find between a 52 and a 148. So I'm going back over here between a 52, change that to a 148. I should get 99.7%. Press enter, and there it is. Between is 99.7% because those numbers were within 3 standard deviation units of the mean. So that's how you do that kind with the empirical rule. Just really be careful about format and rounding for those if you missed one of those particular questions.